it's Reagan, and today I am filming my favorite video to film every single year without fail, and that is my favorite books of the year, or specific to this video, my favorite books of 2017. Now, a few days ago, I did tweet that I was very sick, and I feel like I was, like blessed by the book gods this morning because I woke up well enough to film, though I'm not gonna lie, my voice is a little funky, so please forgive that, but I really didn't want to delay on this video because I love doing it and I love putting it up and seeing everyone else's favorite books, so anyway. So for the entirety of 2017, I read a total of 62 books. Now, I'm not gonna lie, narrowing that number down to my top 10 favorites was so hard. This year I read some of my all-time favorite books throughout the year. I mean, I think my number of 5-star reads this year was more than any of my previous years. There's some books that didn't make this list that honestly would have probably made my top 5 list last year or the year before that. So just prefacing that because holy crap, this year was such a fantastic reading year for me. But without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump right in with book number 1. These books are in no particular order because that would make this even more difficult. I'm just happy I got it down to a top 10, alright. So the first book that made my list is Tower of Dawn by Sarah J. Maas. I feel like I've been talking about this book a lot. Actually, I feel like I've been talking about a lot of these books in this video a lot, but particularly this book just blew me away for so many different reasons, but the reason why I loved it most was because I honestly had so low expectations going into this. I read this book thinking I wasn't gonna like it. I've been kind of a declining fan of the Throne of Glass series and fandom for the past couple of books, so again, I just didn't expect much going into this, but oh my gosh, this book completely blew me out of the water, blew me away. It was incredible. It made me a Kale fangirl again. I loved the new world, all the new characters. I want more books in this world and from these perspectives. I absolutely loved everyone. It was incredible and it totally took me by surprise and also reminded me of all the things I loved about Throne of Glass to begin with, which is why this book had to make my list. It was just so flippin' good. The next book I'm gonna show off is actually the last book I read this year. That's why I feel very strongly about never personally filming this video early because you never know what you're gonna read at the end of the year. They could just make your list, and this book was definitely one of those surprises, and that is Nevermore by Jessica Townsend. This is a middle grade fantasy novel that is just everything I love in fantasy, completely, totally, all of those things. Follows our main character Morgan Crow, who is cursed. She is blamed for every bad thing that befalls the town that she lives in, from broken windows to broken knees, and she is of course blamed most of all for the curse that she has herself, which states that she will die on her 11th birthday. However, on the eve of her 11th birthday, she's swept away by a mysterious man called Jupiter North to a whole new town and world called Nevermore. There she enters trials of magical, majesty and mysticalism, and basically tries to enter a secret society. Trials in this book really give it an amazing competition element that just makes it so much fun. You get to follow Morgan as she kind of has to overcome a lot of her various fears, but also challenge herself in a lot of new ways. It also has fantastic friendship and magic, and the world is just so whimsical and wonderful, and she basically stays in the most amazing hotel of all time. This book, as I mentioned when I introed it, is literally just everything I love in fantasy, and I cannot wait for the next book in this series. I think this is gonna quickly become one of my all-time favorite middle grade series. It's so good. It has so much to offer. Next up was the very first book I read in 2017, and it has made my list, and that is The Unseen World by Liz Moore. This is an adult literary fiction novel that is incredible. This follows our main character Ada, and Ada is a very unusual girl. She was raised and homeschooled by her father, who is like a computer science professor in the 80s, and she herself is essentially a genius. We follow Ada both as a child growing up and kind of grappling both with her unusualness and also trying to discover her father's biggest secret, as well as an adult as she kind of reflects back on her childhood. This story is incredible. I personally love the scholastic setting of this. It's very much centered around her pursuit of knowledge and her father's pursuit of knowledge, but also a complex family dynamic that really adds a lot of really wonderful layers. This story is both equal parts nostalgic, beautiful, heartwarming, harrowing. It's a lot to take in. It is such an incredible story. There's a reason why I read this book first of the year and it stayed with me all year long. It's a really great book. I loved it so very much. The next book I'm going to talk about is the first series I finished this 2017, the first of one of my favorite total series I read this year, and that is The Girl of Fire and Thorns by Rae Carson. I marathoned this entire trilogy over the summer and I absolutely loved it. It's just incredible. This follows our main character Eliza, who is the chosen one. She is the second daughter to a king and queen in a kingdom, and she was also born with a godstone in her stomach, which makes her a religious symbol to both her kingdom and also all the kingdoms within her world, which in turn makes herself feel ostracized and kind of not really like she belongs everywhere because everyone views her either as a symbol or a political pawn. At the beginning of the first novel, she's married off for a political marriage between another kingdom, and that's where we start our story. This is a story of Eliza's like coming of age. Throughout each one of these novels, we follow Eliza as she makes an incredible story arc and character arc and begins to kind of understand herself more. This trilogy is also highly political in that I mean that it's not just about characters and romance, like there's a lot of moving parts going on. And it also includes a very complex magical system, which was really fun to read. But definitely my favorite aspect of the story is Eliza and following her throughout each of these books. In the first book, she struggles a lot with self-doubt, which manifests itself in a lot of different ways, and we kind of have to see her work through her own self-doubt to really begin to accept herself. Again, this is an incredible YA trilogy that I cannot laud more highly. Seriously, pick it up. The next book I'm going to talk about is the concluding novel of a trilogy I read this year, and that is The Fate of the Tearling by Erica Johansson. This is by far and away another one of my all-time favorite fantasy trilogies, and I read the concluding novel this year and it totally swept me off my feet. This is a fantasy series that to me defies all genre expectations and really takes you for a ride in places you just really do not anticipate. But at its core, it follows our main character Kelsey, who at the beginning of the first novel is coming of age and seeks to regain her kingdom from her evil uncle who currently holds power. We follow her as she grapples with learning what it means to rule a kingdom, holding so much power in her hands and trying to make the best decisions possible for her people. Her story parallels with a lot of other characters we also follow in the story. It's incredibly beautiful, very impactful, and again, just completely is so different than anything I've read before. I loved this concluding novel. I mentioned the first two novels in my last year's favorites because that's when I read them. So good, could not recommend this series more highly. Speaking of concluding novels to a trilogy, I have another one for you guys, and that is The Beauty of Darkness by Mary E. Pearson. This is the third and final book to the Remnant Chronicles, which I finished this year as well. This trilogy is a prime example of one that just builds so beautifully from novel to novel. The first novel is kind of limited in scope. It's called The Kiss of Deception. It's very entertaining, but definitely very romantically centered. Each book gets more and more politically complicated, ending with this finale novel, which I honestly feel like is an incredible story and concluding novel to this series. The main character, Leah, is actually one of my favorite YA heroines of all time. She really understands where her strengths lie and where her weaknesses lie and is not afraid to admit that she has a weakness. She's also not afraid to cut you down with her words. Just watching her like verbally spar with people throughout this series, hands down, is one of my favorite things ever. This is just an incredible YA trilogy that I really want more people to continue with, because I feel like a lot of people have read the first one but not the next two. It's so fantastic. Seriously, it made my list for a reason. Next book I'm going to talk about is the next series I read the entirety of this year, well, except for the newly released last one, and that is The Thief by Megan Wallen Turner. This is another series I feel like I've talked endlessly about on my channel, but for great reason, for good reason, because it's fantastic. This is a series that follows a multitude of different characters and is set in a world very much inspired by ancient Greece. We follow 3 different kingdoms that are very much like warring against each other, either outright or like scheming against each other. In the first novel, we follow our main character, who is a thief, and he's currently in prison, and he claims to be the greatest thief of all time. He can steal anything from anyone. At the beginning of this story, he cuts a deal with his captors to essentially steal an impossible item for his freedom. This story is so much more than that from the first book. It definitely introduces a lot of characters in the first book, and then in the next few cracks the political world wide open. Another element to this series that I just love is a storytelling element. We learn a lot about the history of this world through literal storytelling, either around a fire or just to each other, and those stories were always one of my favorite elements of this book. I also just love the characters and the growth that this series experiences. Honestly, I feel like these characters outsmarted me at every turn. I also appreciated the different viewpoints of different rulers we got. Each ruler had a different political situation and therefore had to tread differently through that situation than each other. So there wasn't like one size fits all solutions for these characters, which I just really love. Yes, this is just an incredible, smart, amazing fantasy story that you guys just need to pick up and read as soon as possible. The next book that's made my favorites list is actually a little difficult to talk about because it's the second book to a spin-off series, but the book is Shadowcaster by Cinda Williams-Chima. This is the second book to the Shattered Realms series that she's currently writing. This is the spin-off to the Seven Realms series, which is one of my all-time favorite series, the first one in that being The Demon King. As I said, I can't really talk about any plot points, like even on a basic level, because it will entirely spoil the first series, but I'm gonna do my best to describe why this book is absolutely incredible. Essentially, Cinda Williams-Chima as a whole is one of my favorite authors of all time. Her Seven Realms series and currently her Shattered Realms series, which is an extension of that, is just unbelievably fantastic. She has such a way of writing specific and disparate characters that ultimately have to like team up or work together in ways that they weren't expecting, we weren't expecting, and she's able to like bring all these plot threads together in ways that I've just been like, how did we get here? But I'm happy we did. It also just always has such a wide and fantastic cast of characters with such a range of different personalities and emotions and desires, and this world itself has always been one of my favorites, so being able to revisit it and also experience like an expansion of it has been so awesome. But like I said, I can't really say much more than that because spoilers, but if you have not read the Seven Realms series, do it. If you have, start the Shattered Realms series because it's incredible, seriously. The next book, the second to last book I'm going to talk about in this video, is Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. Now this is just a beautiful story. I'm just gonna phrase it that way. This is a dual perspective novel, but I'm actually only gonna talk about one of the perspectives as I feel like it's more fun to learn the second perspective yourself when you read the story. But one of our main characters we follow is named Laszlo Strange, and he works as a librarian in a city. There he spends his time fetching novels for scholars, and in his free time he researches the subject that fascinates him most, and that is the city of Weep, which 200 years ago completely cut itself off from the entire world, and it lost its name and was renamed Weep. No one can remember its previous name, no one can even find it in any type of record, and Laszlo has dedicated his life to kind of uncovering the secrets of this city. One day, an envoy comes from this city, which is the first envoy in 200 years to leave it, to basically gather experts in various different crafts and fields to come back to Weep to basically help solve its main and biggest issues. From there, Laszlo joins this envoy and goes to the city of Weep, and there he begins his journey and meets all sorts of different types of people. But like I said, this story is so much more than that. Laini Taylor has such a way of writing generational hatred in such a beautiful and painful way. She expresses so clearly the consequences of war and how fostering the impact of that war through generations can really tear a place apart. She is also just an incredibly lyrical writer and has very shiny books. And it's just an astounding story with so many different layers and so many feelings that I honestly cannot recommend this story to you more. It is one of those books that I had to give it about 100 pages and then I kind of fell into it head over heels and fell in love. The first 100 pages I was a little confused, but then everything feels right and you're ready to go on with the rest of the story once you kind of hit that 100-page mark. It's incredible. And the last series I'm going to talk about is probably secretly my favorite one I read this year, but don't tell the other books. And that is A Darker Shade of Magic trilogy by V.E. Schwab. This book like took my life by storm. This whole series did. I read it, I reread the first one, was like, oh, this was really good. And then I power read the next two and my life was forever changed. My emotions were destroyed. Here I am a ghost of my former self. V.E. Schwab is a goddess, okay? She just writes the greatest characters with so much complexity, and you just love them all so much, it like hurts your insides until you feel like you just want to just go into the book yourself, give everyone a hug, and call it a day. But aside from that, the world, the magic, the creativity of this story is just on a whole nother level. As a lot of you guys might know, this story follows 3 parallel Londons, and one of our main characters can travel between these Londons. One of them, Grey London, has no magic, Red London is flourishing, White London is falling apart, and Black London no one can go to. From there, magic, adventure, mayhem ensues. But again, if you've just read the first one, I really implore you to read the second and the third one. I really feel like they expand on the world so much more than the first one does. Particularly the second one kind of has like a Goblet of Fire-esque feeling to it. There's trials and competitions, and it's so much fun. This world is full of whimsy and wonder, but darkness too. It just has everything I love in fantasy series and more. V.E. Schwab has never done me wrong, and this was just such an incredible story. I can't wait to reread it. I can't wait to read more things by this author. It's just so incredible. Alrighty guys, those were my top 10 books that I read in 2017. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know down below some books you read this year that you absolutely loved, and I'll see you soon with another video soon. Goodbye!